Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Mabon, and I am the board chair for the Corona Chamber of Commerce and owner of Creative by Design. We're excited you are here to join us today, and I'd like to share a few announcements before I turn it over to Jeff for our legislative update. Today's event is sponsored by Jet Room. Since 2018, Jet Room has proudly served the high desert communities and began serving the Los Angeles communities in 2021. They focus on educating and medicating. Not only do you get the best products in the industry, but you also receive incredible knowledge from their highly educated wellness specialists. Thank you, Jet Room, for sponsoring this meeting. A reminder, please use the chat button to ask any questions. Send your questions to the chamber host, and we will verbally ask them at the appropriate time. I'd like to invite you to come hear our November 8th Coffee with an Entrepreneur speaker, Bill Steinkirchner. Bill is the founder and co-owner of Stone Church Brewing here in Corona, and he is also a retired Army colonel. Bill's passion for veterans and community service has made him one of the area's most amazing entrepreneurs. He is also the founder of the Amber Waves of Grain Beer Festival. This event is open to the public and offered for free in person and shared on Facebook Live, thanks to a partnership with the City of Corona. RSVP now to save your spot, as there are only a few days left. The link is shown on the screen as well as in our chat. Also join us on November 12th as we will honor all veterans and active duty military. All those who served our nation's military are invited for free with pre-registration by this Friday. Sponsorships and exhibit table spaces are still available. Please visit the link on your screen for more information. We would also like to invite you to the Jimmy Kimmel LA College Bowl at SoFi Stadium on December 18th. The game kicks off at 4:30, but the gates will open at 1:30 to give fans a one-of-a-kind experience with a lot of fun activities. Tickets are on sale now for as low as $40. Nonprofits who are members of the Chamber can also partner with us to promote the game, as well as their own nonprofit, and receive earnings from ticket sales. Lastly, if we reach our goal of 400 tickets sold, Anthony's agreed to shave his beard. Learn more at the bit.ly shown on the screen. If you are a guest and not currently a member of the Corona Chamber, we welcome you to join our Chamber family. Meetings like these are just one of the many benefits of being part of an active, thriving organization like the Corona Chamber. Please outreach to our Membership Development Coordinator, Robert Yanez, and he can review the many incentives for both joining and referring businesses to join. Or if you're already part of the Chamber family and want to learn about the many ways the Chamber can help you market your business, please contact our marketing and sponsorship specialist, Tammy Harwick. I would now like to introduce our legislative advocate, Jeff Gibson. He keeps up with all the movement happening locally, regionally, statewide, and federally. With Jeff's thorough analysis, he helps us act timely on projects and initiatives that help make a difference in shaping our community. As owner of Occidental Communications Group, his knowledge of complex political issues and the great relationships he has built ensure that the Corona Chamber has all the tools to be effective on behalf of the business community. Please help me welcome Jeff Gibson to share a legislative update.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. So getting started today right away, we've got three slides to share with you, and then we can go through some of the other results from our year as well. The first, obviously, is that, and I don't know if you've seen the headlines on this, but that the Inland Empire is leading the nation in highest inflation rate. That the inflation rate has grown by four times, so 400% larger this year than it was this time last year. Last year we were running at about a 1.7% negligible inflation rate. We're now at 6.8 and continuing to rise, driven by fuel prices that are up by almost 100% across the nation. You've got a 25% hit on food prices. So in any case, clearly it's very likely that you are seeing this as well. And so that's why we went through and built up the the record on what we were really looking at, which was where are we headed with this? So we know we're in the hole. We're looking for where we're headed, and where we're headed and what people are honestly believing about where we're headed. Anthony, if we can go to the next slide, is not real strong, folks. The shaded areas here, this chart is directly from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the federal government. None of the labor statistics that we bring you is from any group other than an authority like the federal government. So we're looking at precisely what policymakers are looking at. So the consensus economic opinion at the first part of this year, so January through March, was that inflation was transitory and tied to the reopening of the economy, and that it would be gone before summer. At the very least, it would be gone by Q3. We talked about that at the time and said that the statistics weren't, the fundamentals within the economy weren't showing anything that would indicate that inflation was going to be going away that quickly. Q2, the consensus was it'll be gone by the end of the year. Q3, which we just finished, the consensus is that the recovery for a recovery of kind of the long-term since 1982 inflation rate of about 2%, which is barely negligible, is showing a recovery in Q3 of 2022. Well, the economic policies that are being proposed by the Federal Reserve and others are showing that is very likely going to be 2023, if not sooner, if not later. So whenever the recovery is going to be happening on inflation, expect that it is going to be long-term, because the policies that are going after it that are being adopted are trending towards the long-term as well. So the graph that we have here shows inflation over a 20-year period. And you can see that through the recession that was related to the September 11th shutdown of the economic shutdown of 2 days that triggered a recession, you didn't get inflation above 2% until September 2003. You didn't get inflation above 3% throughout that entire period of economic growth. It popped up about 2006 for a short period of time above 4%. During the Great Recession and the run-up to the Great Recession, it hit just under 5%. It was about 5.7%. Obviously went through a deflationary spiral that everyone on this call, if you're over the age of 10, lived through professionally. We don't need to review that. And that was the first round of quantitative easing and the experiment with 0% interest rates. And that since then, you've gone through a series of economic ups and downs. You've gone through the Obama administration, the Trump administration. You're now into the Biden administration. And as you can see, starting in January, it is almost a straight line up towards 6%. And so in the Inland Empire, specifically centered around Corona, you're looking at closer to 7%. So obviously, one of the things that you would consider in a high inflationary economy is that economic growth is growing. Otherwise, we're in a stagflation, and there's a reason why the title of this is Stagflation is with us for at least a while. Going on to the next slide, Anthony. So real GDP, what you're hearing in the press is the reporting of the nominal GDP number. So GDP, gross domestic product, the nominal gross domestic product is the amount that the economy grew by in any given quarter. And so last quarter, Q3, it grew by 2%, Well, real GDP, as figured by actual economists, is the 2% growth number minus the rise in cost number. Seems to make sense. If your dollar is worth less than it was 3 months ago, and you're counting up your dollars and you're trying to figure out your real productivity, you would minus your growth in dollars by the amount that they actually buy. And with a national inflation rate of 5.3%, you're looking at minus 3.3% GDP. So if you look at Q2 during the shutdown, for instance, for reference, on the chart here, the shutdown shows Q2 of 2020, we experienced negative 27% GDP growth. Again, if you're over the age of 2 and you're on this phone call, you remember living through that very vividly. We don't need to review a lot of the statistics there, but that's what negative growth felt like. In that period of time, we also had a deflationary spiral, which softened some of the lack of GDP growth. Again, it was a spiral downwards. So saying that you only hit the ground at 400 miles an hour versus 800 miles an hour is, I guess that's good news. But in any case, and then obviously the next quarter, as the economy started to turn back on, you had the same amount of growth. What you're having across the board now, so for local GDP growth, California just about kept pace on local GDP growth with the rest of the nation. So if you took 2 and you minus that by the local inflationary rate of 6.8%, then we would have real GDP growth in the Inland Empire over the last 90 days, or the previous 90 days, so about 100 days, of minus 4.8%. That is a real contraction of the overall economy. And there are not policies that generally have worked in the past that are being looked at by the folks in Sacramento or the folks in Washington, D.C., to get us out of this anytime soon. And again, I am not criticizing those policies. I'm telling you, the policies that have worked in every previous recession are not being followed here currently. So generally, that means that the recession is at its beginning as opposed to its end, or in a recovery phase. So it's not great news. Wish we had better news to offer you, but happy to talk about that or anything else. One of the things that I would note on the port, because we've been talking about that, is that the ports are now operating at 24 on a 24/7 schedule. But they are still on the same requirements for air quality, the same requirements for trucking company ownership, the same requirements. None of the other requirements for the port have been relieved. And so what you end up with is, as soon as they reach a basic daily air emissions standard, they stop working. Those air emission standards are based on, everybody say it with me, a normal work schedule. So yes, they are operating at 24/7. There are people that are on the docks, on the berths, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but they can't be polluting the air in any way. So you're not getting a high degree of what we traditionally would call productivity out of those workers. The second piece of that is that since the adoption of a 24/7 schedule, the number of ships off the coast have gone from 57 to 157 as of today. So again, humanities major, last time we met, we were at 110 ships. And I said that 2 weeks ago, we were at 57 ships. This last week, we were at 110. This week, we're at 157. I'm very confident, I'm reasonably confident that 157 is more than 110, and it's also more than 57. In fact, most people would agree that if you added 110 plus 57, you would get a number that's only a little bit higher than 157. So the number of ships has not just doubled, it's actually gone up by almost 300%. So now the good news is that the number of ships sailing towards Los Angeles and Long Beach is tripling. So we now have ships docked all the way past San Clemente. If you go to any point, ironically, none of those ships are being docked north of the ports. So the Santa Monica Bay doesn't have any. Pacific Palisades doesn't have any. Anybody who is empowered to be able to call the mayor of Los Angeles or the mayor of Long Beach and say, I don't want to see ships docked off their beloved coastline, those communities don't have any ships docked. But amazingly, they're docked off of Orange County, they're docked off of San Diego County, they're docked off of Catalina, they're docked off of the Channel Islands, all the areas that we would consider to be protected wetlands that we go through a huge amount of environmental protection on, except of course when we don't. So that's the situation in the ports. Yesterday it was, or 3 days ago, I'm sorry, excuse me, on November 1st, both ports started fining companies $100 per day with accelerating rates for not picking up your freight. Again, you would think that is something that would be very helpful. It was reported as being very helpful. There's a very good reason why people haven't been picking up their ships, though. And I think once it's explained, or picking up their packages, once it's explained, it'll be pretty straightforward. With a 48%, with 48% of American businesses going out of business in the last 18 months, some of them ordered goods from China. Obviously, they don't exist anymore. And those goods, and all, when you see all of those containers stacked up, you think that that's 80%, 90%, 100% of what's coming in. In actuality, it's only about 14 to 15% of the freight overall. So if you just very easily on the back of an envelope, think of that of the approximately 12 million containers that'll come through the Port of LA in the next year, that less than 1 million of them basically make up those huge mounds of containers that we see endlessly on TV screens and get concerned about because it looks odd. It looks impressive and odd at the same time. That it really only takes about 15% of American businesses to go out of business, and you get that type of a backup at the ports. And ports are very land constrained. They're very resource constrained. It's just a part of the business. You only build a port as big as you need it because it's extremely expensive to run, extremely expensive to provision, etc. So the taking of freight out at because it's being fined at $100 a day, has that resulted in any sort of change at the port? Well, yes, it has. What it's resulted in are truckers now leaving containers and chassis, which are the wheels underneath the container, all over the rail right of way and rail lines up and down around the port, because their freight forwarders don't want to pay the $100 per day. So, and again, I'm just thinking out loud here, so you can follow with me, but the LA Times did a major piece on this yesterday, that freight theft is up 400%. So if you are leaving containers abandoned on the rail tracks, and the only way out of this crisis is to get more trains in and out of the port, one, it makes it more difficult to get in and out of the port. But here again, you're also getting people breaking into containers because they're now in unsafe locations and leaving all of the contents of the containers strewn all over the tracks. So this is in less than 48 hours become a major story, and we're tracking it. So it affects us here in Corona, obviously, because the trains come through Corona. So we want to make sure, and if you have right of way at this point, the problems that are being experienced in Wilmington and in Gardena and other areas that have right of way, if you've got right of way in your town, it's very likely that you were if this goes on much longer, that you're going to be seeing containers left in the area as well. So it's something that we're following, and happy to discuss if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. We do have one question. It is regarding the ports. As the ports begin unloading, do you know if the transporting via trains will be more impacted? And is there a limit on how many train cars per train is allowed by law?
So yes, so the ports are operating at 100% capacity. Every single month of this year has broken a record. So they're operating at full and complete capacity. Every shift is filled as far as the dock workers. The trains had a backup at the beginning of COVID, very unwisely, and never in the history of the United States have the Chicago stockyards, which are basically one of the main organizing locations of the ports throughout the United States, shut down. They shut down for a week. And so you have hundreds and hundreds of miles of container rail sitting on sidings across the United States. That has not gone away. In fact, it continues to get worse. Now trains, you're not going to see anything more than double stacked usually, but there are no regulations that I know of. There's physics that coming out of the Port of LA, you can't get over a certain tonnage. There's also air quality issues, so that you can't get over a certain tonnage. So I mean, the LA and Long Beach ports are running at full capacity. The idea that going up to 24/7 was going to have a major impact is negligible. It's just, there are so many different problems across this system. Pointing your finger and saying that it's the Port of LA is kind of like, living a lifestyle in a certain way and getting to the end of your life and saying, it was one thing or the other. In actuality, it was all the decisions that kind of piled up and created some intractable problems for you. And I noticed a question on inflation came through on the chat.
Yes, we have one more question on the ports itself, and then that question on inflation.
Sure. Okay.
So regarding the ports, why aren't some of these ships heading to the Bay Area or Seattle? And this person was just in Seattle, and there was just one ship waiting there.
Sure. There's absolutely no capacity. The capacity that you have at so there are ports. There are physical places around this country called ports that to you and I look very similar to the Port of Los Angeles or the Port of Long Beach, but there are very good economic reasons why the owners of the ships that are floating off of the state of California, and specifically the County of Orange, are willing to keep their ships there. It's because the capacity to handle the containers and get them off and get them moving out through rail and into to their point of destination. All of that system was built to optimize Los Angeles and Long Beach over the last 25 years. And none of the other ports around the nation engaged in those types of investments. Those types of investments were also key to being able to, and I understand, I use the freeways every day. It seems like it's a horrible system. Imagine how bad it would be if people like Jeff Miller, and I know we toot his horn a lot, but this was a key fight going back 20 years, did not fight for grade separations, which when we started in Riverside County on that issue, there was no policy for seeking grade separations. So if you go to Seattle, could you avail yourself of a berth? Sure, but you couldn't get your goods off of the ship as quickly as if you just waited in line at Los Angeles or Long Beach. And again, then you'd have to use a series of rail connections that are less than ideal, especially in the wintertime. So there are very good economic reasons why you cannot lay off. I know Miami had a big to do when one ship arrived to be unloaded in Miami. That one ship, it took 8.5 days to unload, where it takes about 16 hours to unload in Los Angeles and Long Beach. And then you have to get that empty ship back to Los Angeles and Long Beach to again wait in line to get reloaded so that you can go back to whatever area that you're shipping out of. So you can see it doesn't make much economic sense.
Thank you, Jeff. And if you can answer that one question in the chat, and that is,
it flashed up on the screen and moved over. Can you read it?
Yeah,
real quick?
Of course. Yeah. Do the inflation numbers include real estate?
No. There is a measure for real estate, but it's not tied to. That is not one of the driving numbers. The driving numbers and the overall inflation rate are the consumer price index, which usually involves both regular inflation and the consumer price index, anything that you can buy at a store, basically. And that's where you get to the 6.8%. Real estate plays a smaller portion in that, but yeah, it is reflected in the number.
Thank you, Jeff. And with that, there are no more questions.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you, Jeff, for sharing all that information with us. You can always reach out to your local representatives, Assemblymember Sabrina Cervantes and Senator Richard Roth, both of whose contact information is provided on your screen. Before we end today's program, let me share with you about those who are on the call today. We have Wendell Bugtie representing Riverside County Supervisor Karen Spiegel, Brad West representing Assemblymember Sabrina Cervantes, North Grove College President Dr. Monica Green, former State Assembly Member, former City of Corona Mayor and Council Member and successful business owner Jeff Miller, former City of Corona Council Member Yolanda Carrillo. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We'd once again like to thank today's sponsor, Jet Room. Jet Room is proud to be the first legal cannabis dispensary in California's high desert. They pledge to provide the finest personal service and facilities for their patients, who will always enjoy a warm, relaxed, and yet refined ambiance. Learn more at jetroom.com. If you would like to sponsor a future business briefing, please contact the Chamber. Register now to join us next Wednesday, November 10th, as we start getting ready for the 2022 and discuss the new districting changes that will affect you. If you would like to rewatch any part of today's program or would like to share it with others, it can be found on our Chamber's YouTube page. Thank you everyone for attending. Our meeting is adjourned.